Today I'm going to share with you 13 rules for young men that I live by. At least I try to. Rule number 1 is read always. I am always reading something. It might not be the best book you've ever read, but I'm always reading something. And if a book's not good, then I'm just going to get on to the next one. I always have a book on deck as well, something that I can get into. I'm taking book recommendations from other people that I'm writing down. I have a library in my room, It's a bookshelf. And developing my own personal library is something that I'm interested in doing because I love reading. I think it's so important that young men are gleaning this kind of wisdom that is available. If you're not reading, I don't know what you're doing because you're missing out on so much. Maybe you're having a lot of good conversations with older men in your life. If that's the case, that's awesome. But you can do that, and you can also read and get so much from it. Rule number 2 is being hyper vigilant about avoiding sexualized content. In our day and age, in our sexualized culture, it is so easy with pornography, with movies, with social media to be inundated with sexual imagery, and it's just awful for your soul. You don't want to be in that place. You don't want to be distracted in that way as a young man. I've seen so many young men be caught up in this stuff, and it really hinders their mission and their dreams and what they want to accomplish and the path that God has for them because they're held up in this zone in these cycles of lust. That's awful. So be hyper vigilant about cutting those things out of your life. You have to do it. Rule number 3, and I have a really hard time with this one, is speak last. It only perpetuates your insecurities if you're the first one to respond to something that's going on or a question or whatever else. It's like if you're in a group and you're always the one piping in with your opinions and you're taking up all the talking time, do you really think other people around you are saying, oh my goodness, he's so smart, he has so many interesting things to say? Because that's what we tell ourselves. Oh, as long as I can say my piece, people can know how important and special and smart I am. But truly, the one who makes other people feel the smartest is the one that people kind of gravitate towards. And you can do that by incorporating everybody's different perspectives in the end by speaking last. You say, okay, hey, I really appreciate what you said with this, and I just add this piece, or that was a good point, and I would just say this as well. You're adding to it, and in a lot of ways, you're bringing out the best in other people's ideas. You're summarizing those things. Instead of coming in at the beginning and saying, this is how it is, this is da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and that's just not kind of an insecure way of going about it. I have a hard time with this because sometimes I can be insecure. But if you're secure in who you are and you don't need to prove yourself, hey, speak last. Rule number 4 is dating is only for marriage. Guys, if you're not ready for marriage, then do not date. I'm just telling you, you're going to save yourself so much heartache, so much wasted time. This is something I've stuck to really strictly because I just don't want to waste time with somebody that I'm like, hey, this would be cool to get married, but I can't, because I'm not financially ready or not spiritually ready. And so I'm not going to put myself in that position to be let down in that way before I'm ready. Only when you're ready for marriage, begin dating somebody. Number 5 is foster and maintain an alone activity. What does this look like? Well, for me, it's biking. I'll go on bike rides alone. I'll listen to a podcast or an audiobook. I'll do that for a couple hours, and it's just so beneficial to me specifically. It's nice to do things with other people in your life, but you need something that you can do in solitude, in isolation, and maybe it's a time for you to pray as well. You need to get in these spaces of just being alone and being content with that. I just think about like an old wizard guy who goes into the forest alone and to contemplate things. And every once in a while he comes out and he chats with people. I mean, even Jesus, right? He went into the wilderness to pray, and sometimes he would just leave randomly and like, where is he? Well, he's in his place of solitude and isolation of prayer and having those routines and those activities where you can get out of just everything going on in the world and being a part of all these different conversations and all these different relationships to get into isolation, to do your thing, to be captivated by a particular activity or just be in your own thoughts. That's a really healthy activity. Rule number 6 is don't use self-deprecating humor. I am guilty of this, and I was very guilty of this as a teenager. I would use it all the time. I thought that verbally tearing myself down in front of other people made me more humble, but it actually just made me look really, really insecure because you know what? I was really insecure. And you don't want to continue to perpetuate that insecurity by verbalizing that to other people, to tear yourself down. Oh yeah, I suck at this, or I'm trash at this. And like, there's a place to be like, hey, being honest, I'm not the best at this. But if you're making jokes or comments constantly about how awful you are or how much you suck, that you're training yourself to think that way. That negative self-talk is going to make its way into patterns of thought in your brain. It's not just jokes. And so you just don't want to get in the habit of that. It's not the same as being humble. Humility is not just thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less, right? So you just got to stop thinking if you're so awesome or thinking you're so bad. Like, it's not about you. Rule number 7, if you had an idea for at least a week, you need to act on it. This is assuming, of course, that it's somewhat of a wise decision, that it's not a blatantly sinful decision. But if it's something that you want to start or you want to do, or an activity you want to take place, if you've had this idea for a week and there's really nothing stopping you other than like sending an email or setting something up or going out and doing it, or, do it. Like, seriously, I know so many people that want to start YouTube channels or do something on social media, and they talk about it all the time, especially when I talk about my social media page, and they're like, oh, one day I'd like to do something like that. If you've had that idea for a year, why are you not acting on it? What is going on? If you've had the idea for a week, do something about it. Take the first step. Maybe it's not something you can bring into fruition in a week or a day, maybe even a month. Maybe it's going to take longer than that, but at least take the first step. Rule number 8, and this is so important, guys. I can't stress to you how important this is understand your triggers, okay? Understand the sensitive areas, the things that you're insecure about, because as you're in conversation with people, as you have relationships with people, they're going to say things that are going to trigger you, that are going to hit tender spots in your identity. And as those things happen, you're going to find yourself getting riled up emotionally. You're going to find yourself getting irritated, or you're just sensitive about it, right? But if you can understand, hey, this is something that I'm insecure about, and understand that, then you can control your emotions a lot better. One example for me was when I was 21, 22, I didn't have a car. And that was a place of insecurity for me, honestly. I'd made the decision that, hey, like, doesn't make sense for me to have a car right now. But at the same time, when people would mention it or make jokes about it or whatever else, like even in just good fun, it would trigger me because it was a place of insecurity that I believed that because of this, I wasn't successful, or this was something that was, a detriment to who I was. And when people brought it up, man, that was sensitive. That was triggering for me. But when I understand, hey, okay, Isaac, you feel sensitively about this because you feel like it is some indication that you're not where you should be, or you're behind. If you can let go of that and understand that other people don't see it that way, then you can be at peace. You don't need to take it personally. And that's a process, but you need to understand what your triggers are. Rule number 9 is set boundaries. A lot of nice guys have problems with this. They struggle with this. I would kind of put myself in that category, as we're not as outspoken. We're people pleasers at heart. And so setting boundaries tends to be a little bit more challenging for us because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But you need to know that you can't please everybody, and you can't give everybody as much access to your life as they want. And you also can't do everything that people want you to do. You need to say, hey, like at some point, you're crossing a boundary here. You don't have the right to say these things or behave this particular way. I need to set a boundary here. And that is a wise thing to do. That's something you need to get in the habit of doing. And ultimately, it's going to be better for both of you. An example of a boundary that you would need to set, and there's lots of different categories, would be, let's say one of your buddies says a disparaging comment about your girlfriend or your wife even. What do you say to that? Well, you say, hey, this is unacceptable. I'm putting up a boundary here. You can't speak that way about her, right? That's what it means to be a man, right? But if we get in this kind of mindset of just trying to people please and say, okay, well, she won't hear about this, and he's just, it's just him, it's not that big a deal, and he's a little quirky, and da-da-da. It's like, no, you got to set that boundary, right? And so some of these things might be a little bit more challenging for us because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. But we got to be bold and be men. Set those boundaries. Rule number 10 is learn how to tell stories. This is within a social setting, and it's also within your work. Just learn how to tell stories in general. How do you set something up to intrigue somebody, to usher them in to the beginning of a hero's journey of overcoming obstacles and finding that climax and then the conclusion that's satisfying for someone? These things are exciting to incorporate into whatever job you have or whatever conversation you have. If somebody asks you a question about how your day was and you say, oh, it's all right, I did this, I did this, I did this, that's a lot different than bringing them on a story of how you were feeling in the morning and some turning point that changed things, and then how you ultimately got to the place that you are now. It's not changing the reality of what happened. It's framing it in a way that helps people understand and connect deeper. Rule 11, and it's a saying, not my circus, not my monkeys, mind your own business. Don't get in other people's business. You might see a lot of drama going on around you. Don't get in it. Stay out. Focus on the stuff that you can control. Hey, if there's people that you know that are involved in it and you need to be, a listening ear for them and a sounding board, and they're talking to you, like, okay, that's cool. But if you have no control over these situations, if you have no input, if you're not involved in this stuff, then just stay out of it. Like, your life's going to be so much more simple. And more than that, you're going to be able to actually be effective in the areas that you do have control, because your attention and your focus is going to be put on things that are more valuable and important. Rule number 12 is live as frugally as you can while you're single. This is just something that I've done and I found to be just awesome and really beneficial in my life in general. Hey, you don't have anybody else to provide for. It's just you. So why not test yourself? Why not see how much you can save, how much you can give, how much you can invest in yourself that's going to lead you to further progress? And don't just spend it on, what everybody else is buying. Like, come on, you don't need that stuff. It's a good practice in learning to be content. And eventually, if it is God's will for you that you get married and you have a family, that mentality of frugality and also just being content with what you have is going to become so, so important. Rule number 13, and this is the last one that I have for you today. I'd love it if you leave your rule for me in the comments down below, something that you think that I've left out, because this list could be a lot longer, honestly. But rule number 13 is approach people with a genuine curiosity. So often we are enveloped with what's going on with us, what we're interested in, what our beliefs are, what our passions are, what our desires are, how we're doing. If we can embody a curious spirit when we encounter people, how life-giving would that be for them? I often think about, what is the feeling that people leave with after having a conversation with me? Was it, I feel so heard after talking to Isaac, or Isaac really likes to talk, right? Like, and I would never want somebody to go away. And I know they've walked away from a conversation with me as, man, Isaac really likes to talk, or Isaac really, he thinks highly of himself, or something like that. And I just never want people to have that feeling leaving. I want them to feel heard, known, and loved, and spurred on towards their mission and encourage them, honestly. And if I can ask them more questions, if I can be curious about what's going on in their life, then I can get to those deep places where I can truly encourage somebody in something that they're struggling with. That's my heart, that's my goal, and that's why that is rule number 13. Now, obviously, I do not really do all of these super well. Some of them I'm better at than others. I have a lot of place to grow, and people in my life would gladly tell you that, and that's okay. And it's not about doing these things in order to, be the perfect Christian or be the perfect man. We have so much growth to do, but it's just really just inviting us on this journey of growing more and more to be the person that God wants us to be. And part of the brotherhood is encouraging and spurring one another on to do just that. If you enjoyed this video and got something from it, I ask you to subscribe, because I'm putting out new videos like this every single week. If you want to join the Brotherhood, become a channel member. You can join our Discord and just generally support what I'm doing. Until next time, keep pursuing the mission.